All the stories you've been telling tonight seem to fall into two categories. There's the type where you have the world of the living on one side, the world of the death on the other, and some force that allows a crossing over from one side to the other. This would include ghosts and the like. The second type involves paranormal abilities, premonitions, the ability to predict the future. All of your stories belong to one of these two groups. In fact, your experiences tend to fall almost totally under one of these categories or the other. What I mean is, people who see ghosts just see ghosts and never have premonitions. And those who have premonitions don't see ghosts. I don't know why, but there would appear to be an individual preference for one or the other. At least that's the impression I get. Of course, some people don't fall into either category. Me, for instance, in my 30-odd years, I've never once seen a ghost, never once had a premonition or a prophetic dream. There was one time I was riding in an elevator with a couple of friends and they swore they saw a ghost riding with us, but I didn't see a thing. They claimed there was a woman in a grey suit standing right next to me, but there wasn't any woman with us, at least as far as I could make out. The three of us were the only ones in the elevator, and these two friends weren't the type to deliberately play tricks on me. The whole thing was really weird, but the fact remains that I've still never seen a ghost.
But there was just one time when I had an experience that scared me out of my wits. This happened over 10 years ago and I've never told anybody about it. I was afraid to even talk about it. I felt that if I did, it might happen all over again. So I've never brought it up. But tonight, each of you have related your own story and scary experience. And as the host, I can't very well call it a night without contributing something of my own. So I've decided to just come out right out and tell you the story. Here goes. I graduated from high school at the end of the 1960s, just when the student movement was in full swing. I was part of the hippie generation and refused to go to college. Instead, I wandered all over Japan working at various manual labour jobs. I was convinced that this was the most righteous way to live. Young and impetuous, I guess you'd call me. Looking back on it now, I think I had a pretty fun life back then. Whether that was the right choice or not, if I had to do it over again, I'm pretty sure I would. In the fall of my second year of roaming all around the country, I got a job for a couple of months as a night watchman at junior high school. This was in a school in a tiny town in Niigata Prefecture. I'd gotten pretty worn out working over the summer and wanted to take it easy for a while.
The gate to the pool banged away in the wind, like some crazy person who alternately shakes his head and nods. Being a night watchman isn't exactly rocket science. During the day I slept in the janitor's office, and at night all I had to do was go twice round the whole school, making sure everything was okay. The rest of the time I listened to records in the music room, read books in the library, played basketball by myself in the gym. Being alone all night in a school isn't so bad, really. Was I afraid? No way. When you're 18 or 19, nothing phases you. I don't imagine any of you have ever worked as a night watchman, so maybe I should explain the duties. You're supposed to make 2 rounds each night at 9 PM and at 3 AM. That's the schedule. The school was a fairly new 3-storey concrete building with 18 to 20 classrooms. Not an especially large school as things go. In addition to the classrooms, you had a music room, a home economics room, an art studio, a staff room and the principal's office, plus a separate cafeteria, swimming pool, gym and an auditorium. And my job was to make a quick check of all of these.
As I made my rounds, I followed a 20-point checklist. I'd made a check mark next to each one. Staff office, check. Science lab, check. I suppose I could have just stayed in bed in the janitor's room where I slept and checked these off without going to the trouble of actually walking around. But I wasn't such a haphazard sort of guy. It didn't take much time to make the rounds, and besides, if someone broke in while I was sleeping, I'd be the one who'd get attacked. Anyway, there I was each night at 9 and 3, making my rounds, a flashlight in my left hand, a wooden kendo sword in my right. I practiced kendo in high school and felt pretty confident in my ability to fend off anyone. If an attacker was an amateur, and even if he had a real sword with him, that wouldn't have scared me. I was young, remember? If it happened now, I'd run like hell. Anyhow, this took place on a windy night in the beginning of October. It was actually kind of steamy for that time of year. A swarm of mosquitoes buzzed around in the evening, and I remember burning a couple of mosquito repellent coils to keep them away. The wind was noisy, the gate to the swimming pool was broken, and the wind made the gate slap open and shut. I thought of fixing it, but it was too dark out, so I kept it banging all night.
When the alarm went off at 3 AM, I woke up feeling weird. I can't explain it, but I just felt different. I had to force myself to get out of bed and get ready to make my rounds. The last place on my checklist was the boiler room next to the cafeteria on the east side of the building. As I passed the entrance, I caught my reflection in the newly installed mirror. Relieved that it was just me, I put my flashlight down, took a hairbrush from my pocket and absent-mindedly rubbed it against my palm. As I did, I glanced at myself in the mirror. After a moment, I realised something odd. My reflection wasn't me. It looked exactly like me on the outside, but it definitely wasn't me. The one thing I did understand was that this other figure loathed me. Inside it was hatred like an iceberg floating in a dark sea. Dumbfounded, my hairbrush slipped from my fingers and fell to the floor. The hairbrush in the mirror fell to the floor too. We stood there staring at each other. I felt as though I was bound hand and foot and couldn't move.
Finally, his hand moved, the fingertips of his right hand touching his chin, and then slowly, like a bug, creeping up his face. I suddenly realised I was doing the same thing, as though I was a reflection of what was in the mirror and he was trying to take control of me. Wrenching out my last ounce of strength, I roared out a growl, and the bonds that held me rooted to the spot broke. I raised my kendo sword and smashed it down on the mirror as hard as I could. I heard glass shattering, but didn't look back as I raced back to my room. Once inside, I hurriedly locked the door and leaped under the covers. I was worried about the hairbrush I'd dropped on the floor, but there was no way I was going back.
The wind was howling the whole time, and the gate to the pool continued to make a racket until dawn. Yes, yes, no, yes, no, no, no. And when the sun came up, the typhoon had already passed. The wind had died down, and it was a sunny day. I went over to the entrance. My wooden sword was there, but no mirror. There never had been any mirror there. I couldn't believe my eyes, but there was only one possible explanation. I had finally been afflicted by the paranormal. I had not, however, had one of those experiences that I mentioned earlier. There was neither ghostly nor a premonition.
What I saw wasn't a ghost. It was simply myself. Strange and altered and bizarre, but myself. I can never forget how terrified I was that night, and whenever I remember it, this thought always springs to my mind, that the most frightening thing in the world is our own self. What do you think? You may have noticed that I don't have a single mirror here in my house. Learning to shave without one was no easy feat, believe me.